Hey everybody, it's Jason with Parallel Reality coming back here today with an article from The Federalist. This is dated March 11th, and it's kind of a longer one. It says, America is a nation, not an idea. And we've heard a lot about this recently, and I think I know what this is going to refer to. I haven't actually read the article yet. Excuse me, not cutting that out. But let's go ahead and see if it does, and it touches on what I thought it is referring to here. Scrolling all the way down. It says, last week, President Trump said farmers in South Africa who are facing confiscation of their lands without compensation under a new land expropriation law could be offered an expedited pathway to U.S. citizenship. Okay, so this is not at all what I was thinking it was going to be referring to. Maybe that'll still be in here somewhere because it is a long article, but it is not. Anyway, it says the South African law, which proponents claim is designed to redress apartheid-era grievances of the country's black majority against its white minority, prompted Trump to announce last month that his administration will cut all U.S. subsidies to South Africa and launch an investigation into alleged human rights violations against the white Afrikaner minority perpetuated by the regime of President Cyril Ramaphosa and his African National Congress Party. And yes, they are killing whites there, and there's footage everywhere you could find of it. It's not difficult to find. Thus, to the extent the corporate press has covered these developments in South Africa at all, which I don't believe they have, but, if white people are being hurt, the press doesn't care. It says it has all been mostly to dismiss any concerns about the land expropriation law and violence against white Afrikaner farmers as conspiracy theories pushed by Trump and Elon Musk, himself an Afrikaner who has recently decried the racist anti-white laws and policies in his native country, such as the fact that Starlink isn't allowed to operate in South Africa because Musk is not black. And yes, that's a true thing, and you can just go ahead and click on the link here to actually see that. It says, but these aren't just conspiracy theories. They're real problems that portend very bad things for Afrikaners and all South Africans. So what was important about Trump's response, though, is that by offering Afrikaner farmers an expedited pathway to U.S. citizenship, the president acknowledged that America isn't just an idea, but a nation. Prioritizing certain foreigners over others is a repudiation of the popular but fatuous notion that any person from any culture or part of the world can become an American simply by going through a neutral administrative process. In other words, it matters where you come from, what you believe, and how you live. In practice, that means it's going to be easier for some foreigners to become Americans than it is for others. It's not racist or bigoted to say this, but simply to acknowledge reality. A reality, by the way, that was the basis of our entire immigration system until 1965. Before the 1965 immigration changes, U.S. immigration law reflected the fact that America is a particular people with a particular culture and traditions, a nation, in other words, with a shared past and a common future. That being the case, foreigners with more points of cultural contact with America will find it much easier to assimilate and become full-fledged Americans than foreigners who have very few cultural connections to us. Yeah, that seems quite obvious. And as it says right here, there we go, this is just common sense. If we prioritize the Afrikaner farmer, as Trump proposes, it's because his cultural and ancestral roots are largely the same as the pioneers and pilgrims who came to America from Europe and whose descendants founded our republic. Last week, Agriculture Secretary Brooke Rollins said Trump's vision is the right one. This is the sort of immigrant we want, and if the South African regime now, kleptocratic, anarchic, and increasingly incompetent, does not want this historic class of entrepreneurs, then America does. As Rollins is correct, and her characterization of Afrikaner farmers as the sort of immigrant we want gets to the heart of the matter. It's not about race or ethnicity. We don't want the Afrikaner because he is white. We want him because of his many cultural ties to America. Rollins mentioned some of those in her statement, lauding the Afrikaner devotion to land and heritage. Pioneers in the best tradition, they made gardens of the wilderness and transformed their country into the breadbasket of a continent. The plain fact is that an Afrikaner farmer, a descendant of Dutch Calvinists who settled in South Africa more than 3 centuries ago, will assimilate to our American way of life much faster and more easily than a Muslim from the Middle East, or a villager from the Peruvian highlands, or even a computer programmer from India. Some foreigners, like Mahmoud Khalil, the Columbia University grad and pro-Hamas activist who was arrested over the weekend, and this would have been not the last weekend from when you're listening to this, but the one before. So he was arrested over the weekend on charges he was providing support to Hamas, are so far removed from American culture that and ideals that they might never really become Americans, even if they are allowed to stay. No, they won't. Okay, so our immigration system should reflect that reality. That means it should not take the Afrikaner farmer nearly as long to become an American citizen as it might take someone like Khalil. So far from being racist or xenophobic, such a policy would simply reflect the reality of assimilation and prioritize social cohesion over fake process neutralism. It's hard to overstate how much these things really matter and how ignoring them produces misery in a nation. If you want to see what an immigration policy that rejects these realities produces, look at what has happened to Western Europe over the last decade. You can see it happening right now. And it doesn't necessarily even need to be the last decade, it's just like right now. So millions of unassimilated migrants from Africa and the Middle East have taken up residence in cities and communities across Europe. It has produced chaos, social disintegration, and lawlessness. There's a reason anti-immigration parties are gaining traction across the continent. The native citizens of those countries, who must live with the disastrous effects of mass immigration, are realizing that their leaders have prioritized the needs of foreigners over the needs and well-being of their own people. They are rightly enraged by this betrayal, and the conflict it has engendered is only going to grow as time goes on. So, and it is growing. You can see it, again, it's one of those things you can very easily see happening right now. Just look at like the elections that have happened in Europe everywhere, and there you go. Some will object to this entire line of reasoning about cultural points of contact. They will argue that American culture isn't really derived from Christian Europe, that America is just a mishmash of different things from all over the world that has inexorably led us to the multiculturalism of our time. Hence, prioritizing Afrikaners or any other group based on a shared ancestral or cultural heritage is at best simply wrong, and at worst is cover for racist immigration policy. Because of course they're going to go back to the R word because it's the only argument they ever have for anything. It says, to this argument, one can only reply that multiculturalism is a polite fiction that's been foisted on us by liberal ideologues beginning in the 1960s. It was and is part of a broader program of cultural revolution that aims to dismantle Western civilization, destroy the Christian faith on which that civilization depends, and replace it with a flattened globalist corporatism that uses process neutralism to reduce people to economic units and nations to GDP output. The policies multiculturalism inevitably produces are those favored by the global corporatists, open markets, and open borders. And that is to say, there is nothing organic or authentic about multiculturalism. It's a false construct deployed as a weapon against the West. By contrast, the historical and cultural reality is that America is the creation of the English people. Our culture and way of life are indelibly English. Our religious sensibilities and civic morality are thoroughly Christian. To the extent that foreigners are able to adopt these things and make them their own, they will become Americans. And, of course, foreigners who share these cultural roots will have an easier time of it. There's a reason that successive waves of European immigrants in the 18th and 19th centuries were able to assimilate relatively quickly to American culture and American way of life. It was a way of life and a culture they substantially shared with America already. So we need to find our way back to being able to talk about these things without incessant accusations of racism and xenophobia. For most of our history, U.S. immigration policy served the interests of the American people above all. Their well-being, not those of would-be immigrants or asylum seekers, was the first priority of our leaders, as it should be. Any nation that wishes to maintain its identity, heritage, and social cohesion must have such an immigration policy. We did once, and we can again. But to get there, we have to recover the idea of the American nationhood and shed the false notion that America is just a series of propositions open to every person from every corner of the world. In his RNC speech last summer, Vice President J.D. Vance described a cemetery plot on a mountainside in eastern Kentucky near his family's ancestral home. He knows he will be buried there among his family and his people, who love this country, not only because it's a good idea, but because in their bones they know this is their home, and it will be their children's home, and they would die fighting to protect it. That is the source of America's greatness. Says Vance is right. America is great because it is our home, the only home we'll ever have. We need to guard it carefully, and that means insisting to outsiders that unless they are willing to assimilate completely and make this country their only home, they can never become Americans. Very good. I like that. I kind of agree with everything here. And I thought with this, just to go back to what I was saying at the beginning, this is America as a nation, not an idea, that there was one of those, was it Jubilee or something, that had a Sam Cedar on, who's a leftist, for people that don't know who that is, and you probably shouldn't, because, again, leftists are not particularly intelligent. But this time it was actually a leftist surrounded by a bunch of, I think, like, I didn't watch it, I just saw, like, a couple of clips played on other channels, but he was surrounded by conservatives, and he was the one that was trying to say that America is an idea, not like a nation. He had it like backwards from this article. So that's what I thought that this was going to go into, is like the author of the article read or listened to that. And it was like, I disagree, and here's why. But I was wrong, obviously. So I'm on board with bringing the Afrikaner population here, or the farmers. I mean, can't really go wrong with bringing more farmers here. But we'll see where this goes. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Please like, share, subscribe, and I will talk to you soon. Bye.